My name is Jay Dillman. I put on this with Sana. How many of you started in traditional games? I'm not the next speaker, by the way. I'm just introducing him. I started in traditional games too. Several years ago, I was in Illinois at a small startup. It ended up going under due to licensing fees. You can work on a game for 3 or 4 years and it'll never see the light of day in traditional games. You know, I love social games that you can develop very quickly, iterate, put it out, see if it succeeds. If not, you move on to the next. But in traditional games, things take forever, and it may or may never see the light of day. Even those that make it out, only a fourth of them find success. And I'm kind of getting to why we brought Curt in as our next speaker. When I moved here to San Francisco, I started out doing consulting with ad agencies. This was in the early days of Facebook, back when there was SuperPoke and there weren't very many other applications. And, you know, I looked at this and I thought, this is a joke. You know, this isn't going to be a viable part of the gaming industry. This little, you know, social sector, it's not going to last. But I ended up sticking around and staying in social games since then, since about 2006, 2007. It's been this amazing wave of success that has taken off. And is it ringing really loud?
Yes.
How's this? Better? So I started, you know, riding that wave of success. Facebook turned down their dials for virality. It scared everybody, and a lot of companies didn't perform as well. They were relying on specific Facebook channels that didn't work out so well. And Sana and I were watching who is still finding that success in Facebook, who's still being able to find success on these channels. Curt is one of those. Blake is another one of those. So that's why we brought them on to talk to you today. But with that, I want to introduce one of the most successful people, Curt.
Apparently, I'm one of the most. Oh, now I'm most successful people who can disconnect the projector. Hold on. All right. Don't mind the microphone dragging sound here.
This is not as hard as it was.
How many presenters does it take to set up a presentation? All right, so. Maybe there you go. All right, here we go. Excellent. So my name is Curt Bererton. I'm the CEO of ZipZapPlay's. We have been around for a long time. If I had predicted the rise of social games, we would have been doing social games a lot sooner than we were. But first, let me start off with the first thing I start off all my presentations with, which is I might be giving some advice, you might ask some questions, and take everything I say with a huge grain of salt, because as Paul Bookman once said, my advice may not apply to your situation, just like Blake's advice might not apply to me, but you know, hear what I say and then use it as best works for you. So everyone has their own style, and happy to chat and share what we've learned. So the first thing I'd like to talk about that we've learned over our 3 years is basically about culture and team. So we were 6 people when we built Baking Life, which is currently our largest game on the platform. And one of the rules that we have, and you'll see this on our website, is no prima donnas and no drama queens, which basically means we don't like working with people who are awesome but have a huge ego. And then the other thing is people who create sort of overly dramatic situations at work. So in general, our culture is really sort of everybody gets along really well. We all play nice together, and that can lead to speed, which is part of the point of the presentation that I'm hoping to make tonight. Is, if anything, being successful in the space is about speed of execution and trying your ideas in the market and seeing that there is something there, either in the viral channels or the monetization, etc. And lastly, the main reason why culture and team is important is life is too short to work somewhere where you're getting into yelling matches or somebody's coming and yelling at you because you didn't get something done. What we try to do at ZipZapPlay is set the bar really high on both on personality as well as skill. And so that makes it very hard for us to hire, but at the same time makes it so that we can move fast with the people we do get. So that's something that we've learned about culture and team, and we've had some people leave us, which I think one who basically was really, really awesome, but needed to drive conversations as well as planning, and that didn't work out with the culture, because then we were getting into conflicts, and that made us go slower. So in general, if you've got really smart people in the room, they may sort of disagree, but they'll find a way around that disagreement in a smart way much faster. So now I'll talk about some of the mistakes we made in learning to become fast. Our first product was actually not on Facebook at all. We started the company in 2007. My co-founder, Matilda, and I. My background is fairly technical. I have a doctorate in robotics, which has absolutely nothing to do with building social games. But I know how to build code and technical architectures. And my co-founder, Matilda, is really sort of a specialist in interaction design and game design. So we spent 1.5 years. This is what we quit our jobs to do, was to build this website called Playcrafter. And what it is, and it's still up, you can go check it out right now, is a website where you can create games. And basically, it's all in Flash. You can drag and drop stuff. There's a ton of stuff in the workshop, basically thousands of different game pieces with which you can make your games. And to some extent, I would say, this is back when we had 11,915 games. Now there's about 115,000 games that have been made. And overall, our users on that site actually love Playcrafter. In fact, the retention numbers are awesome. But it turns out that the people, the target market, and this being an engineer, the target market who uses this, teenage males. It turns out teenage males don't monetize very well. So, had we known that in advance or done our market research a little bit better, we might have realized what we were building was for teenage males. So even though I consider Playcrafter.com to actually be a technical and design success, it was not a business success. It makes a little bit of money, but not a lot of money. That was an extremely hard lesson for us to learn. So I don't know if you guys have been to other talks where people are like, you're going to love that first product you build as an entrepreneur or as a developer. You'll fall in love with it. We fell in love with Playcrafter, and we held on to it too long. And some of the mistakes we made were waiting way too long, as Blake was saying, to get it out to the market. And we didn't have virality built in. We didn't have monetization built in. We took forever to figure out that, oh, actually, there isn't going to be a lot of money here. So one of the lessons we learned here is don't do that. So every product we build comes with core virality built in, comes with core monetization built in. If you don't have a plan for either of those in your game that you're building, then you're doing something wrong. And as an engineer and a product person, we were not business people, so let that be a lesson to you. Make sure there's going to be a market for your game, and then you have plans for how to get your game out to the people who are going to be playing it, and how they're going to pay you, and why they're going to pay you. So, after 1.5 years on Playcrafter, we finally figured out that, oh, there's this great light that is Facebook social gaming. So this is the game that is sweeping Facebook right now. Well, no, actually. This was the first game we built on Facebook, and it was terrible. It was terrible. We thought we had a lot of it. We had customization. We figured out, oh, a lot of games are doing customization. In this game, you actually play these cat pirates. Cat pirates, why? I'll get to that in a little bit. Why cat pirates? I'll tell you why. Turns out it was, well, anyways, I'll get that. And, but we had customization. We even had this appointment mechanic, so you'd sail to these different islands, and you'd have these ship battles, and you'd have to recruit your friends. So we had some of the ideas, but we really had no clue about what worked on Facebook. So Blake covered a lot of things. Just look at the top 100 games. Can you see commonalities there? Blake talked about some sort of cute, nurturing. Facebook, skews a little bit towards the female audience. It doesn't mean there aren't good games that really hit a male demographic. Mafia Wars is, perfect example. But look in the top 100 and count how many are like pure hardcore gaming games. If you don't see one there, that's probably because they don't do as well on Facebook. So you might want to think about that, but before you put on your real-time synchronous multiplayer Diablo clone. Oh, by the way, Zynga built one. and spent $2 million or more. So don't do that. And going back to what Blake said, people come to Facebook, they're just checking out their friends. It needs to be a short experience. And I think that's more than just on Facebook, that's also on other mobile platforms. If you look at the rise of some of the very popular games, it needs to fit into people's lives because the demographic of the gaming audience is also getting older and we're all busy. I don't know about you guys, but the only time I have to play is a few minutes at work and on my iPhone, basically. So, think about the time that you have to play games and all the audience that's available and how much time they have to play games, and specifically on Facebook. So, lesson on this one, we didn't know what worked on Facebook. Virality channels were not fully exploited, although we did have some of the standard level up, viral channels, but nowhere near what it should have been. So, our next game was a much smarter bet, I would say. It was called Happy Habitat. Just for reference, if you go and look at the traffic graph on these games, you'll see that Cat's Cove got to about 8,000 daily active players. Happy Habitat, we actually got to about 80,000 daily active players, which for us was pretty good. And actually, that Happy Habitat was paying the bills for a while. But then it got to be, there's this equation that's super important for all products, which is cost of user acquisition and lifetime value. If you haven't heard those terms, you should go learn them. But basically, it's how much does it cost to get someone playing your game, and how much money will they, over the lifetime of that game, end up paying you. So if you don't know those numbers, you should be tracking them for your game. If you don't have tracking in place, you might want to put it in place. We use Contagion for some high-level stuff, but we have an internal system for our own split testing and internal metrics. But anyways, the high-level picture of Happy Habitat specifically was, okay, Farmville does really well, so we'll have a little bit of farming, but what are some other cool inspirations that are maybe not on Facebook, that haven't been done before? And so one of the ones for Happy Habitat was Viva Pinata. So in this game, you actually plant crops. Depending on what you plant, different animals will come. And it was kind of cute, but it had several fundamental flaws. One of them was the animals took time to grow up, and you had to wait till the animals grew up, and you wanted to get sort of a colony of 10 pandas or something, which is one of the achievements. You were timing the food, and there's this appointment mechanic, just like Farmville, where you had to wait for the food to be there to feed your animals. If you didn't feed your animals, well, they ran away, or at first they died. Turns out, don't do that. In terms of punishing the players, that's bad. But it became too complicated for people's schedules. So, and then going back to that, if you look at some of the core mechanics that have spread across the top 100 games, one of them is this appointment mechanic or harvest mechanic. So there's a reason that works on Facebook, and you should think about that. So basically, you set something up, and a few minutes, an hour later, or 24 hours later, you come back. You see that? Look at the top 100 games. That's in a significant percentage of the top 100 games. And what that does is give people a reason to come back to the game. So we had that in this game, but we overcomplicated it with sort of two differing schedules of sort of the growth and feeding times of the animals and the other. So even sort of, you'd think a relatively small mechanic change, oh, it should still be pretty successful with the Facebook audience. You can still screw it up if you don't understand why the existing mechanics are successful on the platform. All right, so finally we get to baking life. So I haven't been talking about the numbers in the top there, but you might have noticed that Playcrafter, 1.5 years, Cat's Cove, 4.5 weeks. Let me go back. Happy Habitat, 5 weeks, and Baking Life on Facebook, 6 weeks. During this time, we were 6 people. We were able to create, from idea to launch on the platform, each of these games in each of those time frames. So Playcrafter, 1.5 years. And then we built Cat's Cove in 4.5 weeks with, I think it was 5 people at the time. And then we built Happy Habitat in 5 and Baking Life in 6 weeks. And so it is doable, but the way we do that is by figuring out what is the core essence of the game that you're building. And in these iterations of moving on these games, we sort of honed down on what those core features needed to be. And one of the key ones we were missing on Happy Habitat that we got right on Baking Life was giving people a reason to send messages to their friend. Going back to what Blake was saying earlier, if you don't think about your viral channels as the person publishing this story or sending this message to their friend needs a reason to send it, and the person receiving that message needs a reason to receive it. And so we did a lot more work on Baking Life. You can go and play and see what the existing channels are, but that's definitely a part of it. Another big part of why Baking Life was successful is basically we tested the theme. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Eric Ries and the lean startup methodology and stuff like that, but basically the idea that try stuff out as fast as possible and see if it works. It's this concept of a minimum viable product, which is the shortest list of features that you think will engage the user, will cause them to be viral, and cause them to monetize. That's how we get them out. It's not because we work 100-hour weeks. In fact, we only work 50-hour weeks. And when we built Baking Life, we were only working 50 hours a week. And that is how we move fast. Is figure out an idea that you think will work, and then build the smallest thing around it. If anything, Playcrafter taught us that, because we spent forever building and tweaking everything, and we were so proud of it when it launched. It was awesome, and then and actually the users quite liked it, but they weren't paying us, so it didn't matter. So to get back to Baking Life, what went right? We got the viral channels right. We tested this theme out, and how did we test it? Well, I'll give you sort of a well-known secret, which is you can, for example, run ads for something that doesn't exist, and then see if people click on the ads. And that will tell you relatively consistently whether or not something will be received well in the Facebook audience. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars. I mean, it's better if you do, but you could spend $50 and find out, oh, I've got these 2 ideas for a game. One's going to be sci-fi, space teddy bears, and the other one's purple elephants with unicorn horns. And you put those 2 up at the same time, and you find out, oh, the click-through rate on one is 1/4 the click-through rate on the other. That's a huge indication of audience interest on Facebook in any case. But I would say it also applies across multiple platforms. So that's one of the things we do. There's a number of things that we talk about. In any case, baking tested very well, which is how we chose that when there basically was no baking game on Facebook. At least not to our knowledge. Maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't know of any baking game on Facebook. Another sign that was positive was that it was successful off Facebook platforms. So, what we try to do is we take ideas that are off of Facebook, put them in a way that works on Facebook, and then use our own innovation. And so, getting to what are the innovative parts of Baking Life. That's the next slide. So I will talk about that shortly. So I've been talking a lot about this, try quickly, try often, and learn a lot. So this is something that I'll get back, I'll keep on hitting you with, which is please don't spend 2 years building this awesome Facebook game. You can do it in a much shorter period of time if you just say, what is the coolest aspect of this thing that I'm building, and just build that. Some of the things that we do, we play test early. We have paper prototypes that we bring people in off the street and we play test. I've already talked about this concept of the minimum viable game. What is the shortest list of features that will appeal to a user? Watch the metrics. I could give a talk for hours about the metrics and how many metric systems we threw out and how many we still use, and it's a conversation for an entire presentation. But the biggest one, of course, is lifetime value is greater than CPI. That's cost per install. That's cost of acquisition. But are your users coming back to your game? Are you even watching that? How much are they paying you? Are you even tracking that? One would hope so. Are the people sending out the viral messages that you think are interesting to the other users? And then are people clicking on them? We also spend a lot of our time and spend a lot of our engineering resources building a split test or A/B test system that works. So we can now write an A/B test with 1 line of code, and we can push the code to production in under 2 minutes, and we can get the metrics back in 5 minutes approximately. You may not have enough data in 5 minutes. It might be a much longer term split test, but sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes you're just saying, well, do people click more through this dialogue or not? And so you'll notice what I haven't talked about is kick-ass game design. I think the culture on Facebook is changing where that's mattering a lot more. And don't get me wrong, I love game design. Playcrafter, if anything, was an exercise in game design pain. So, if anything, that's what we learned. And but you need to be smart in this space. Zynga watches these metrics like a hawk. They know when something works, and that metrics can be applied to game design. They don't need to drive game design, and there are some companies where it's pretty clear that metrics have optimized them to this peak that is, wow, I don't know how else you could have possibly built this thing, because no designer would have ever built this thing. But I think metrics should influence design, and that's very important. And in my mind, it's a big difference between metrics driving design and metrics influencing design. And so that's another big lesson that we learned over time, because we had no metrics in Playcrafter. So here's the high-level story, and I only have a couple minutes left, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. But if you look at, and I think about a lot of products now like this. If you look at high-risk products, oh, no one has ever built this thing before, and it's going to be so awesome. Well, you have to ask yourself, was Half-Life really the first ever first-person shooter? Was Quake the first ever first-person shooter? Not really. But if you can improve on something that was already successful and bring your own coolness and your own design savvy to it, then you can win. And so what we learned eventually, Playcrafter, was how many uber successful game creation software companies are there out there? Not so many, it turns out. And then eventually, we did this really risky thing with Cat's Cove. We sort of figured out the audience, and oh, animals are cute. Nurturing seems to be a popular theme on Facebook. Okay, happy habitat. It was pretty good, not awesome. And then Baking Life, which is pretty decent. I'll call it pretty decent. It's over 1 million DAU still, even though the viral channels are. We can talk about that later. But if you want to make money, you can still just go and clone stuff. But that's also, I say low risk here, but there's also some more risk there too. If you're just going to make another game exactly like somebody else, then you might not get the traffic. So I call it low risk in the sense that if you look at some of the popular mobile game companies, they're taking games off of Facebook and copying them onto other platforms. If you look at Zynga's initial strategy, Playdum's initial strategy, they took something that worked and moved it somewhere else. You can make money doing that. You can take a game that works right now and bring it to Russia, bring it to France. I assure you, you will make money. Now, is it intellectually satisfying? For us, that's just not in our DNA. I think it's much more satisfying, and you'll get better people if you say, we're going to make this better than it has ever been before. So let's talk about the things that went right in Baking Life. So we tested the theme. Restaurant games are doing pretty well. We didn't set out to make a restaurant game, but baking tested well, and so we looked at the mechanics that worked, and that went pretty well. We added our own viral cupcake story, which is now in a lot of games. Let that also be a lesson to you. If you do something that works, lots of people will use that thing. So we have this cupcake creator. If you go play Baking Life, it harkens back to our user-generated content days, and it sends a more meaningful message between two people, in that I can make a cupcake specifically for you, and that gives me a reason to do something cool, and you a reason to click on it because it's custom for you. Now, don't go and make it so that it has 50 million different things you can do. Facebook users don't have the time to spend hours making a cupcake, so it's pretty simple. And then the other twist that we applied to the existing sort of restaurant games is, well, we thought about what would work in the theme, and so this idea of standing in line at a retail bakery became one of the core pieces of the mechanic as well. And so these were just, this is just a few of the things we took from what was working on Facebook and did our own innovations and our own twists based on what we thought would make it better. So I'm almost done, and I guess, how much time do we have?
We have a few minutes for questions.
So I have a few minutes for questions. I covered a lot of different topics, but the high-level message is, don't make the same mistakes we did, and I think the biggest mistake was moving too slow, launching too late, not having the core game and retention figured out, along with the core viral and the core monetization. So please launch your products as fast as humanly possible, because if you think you have something cool, you'll only know when you start seeing either the dollars roll in or the metrics roll in that say, oh my god, people are spending hours or sending out millions of invites, etc. So don't do what we did. Anyways.
Time for a couple of questions.
Too many questions. All right, well, one in the front here, and then
How did you market?
So we had some amount of Facebook ads, and we also, did relatively well in the viral channels, and that certainly helped us. You can see something interesting looking at the traffic curves of games. Just look for a spike up. That's an indication of an ad spend, typically. Either that or they made some kick-ass viral feature. And you should go check out that game anyways, because maybe they did something cool you should look at. But it was a combination, mostly Facebook marketing and our own virals. Marcus?
Right, you did mention eventually why Cat Pirates?
Cat Coves? Oh, why Cat Cove? So Cat's Cove with Cat Pirates. So you mentioned, remember how I said we ran some ads? So it turns out Cat Pirates did pretty well in that test. And so, exactly. I think we had sort of UFO-themed games. Yeah, we had a whole bunch of random stuff. We had no clue what was going to work on the platform. So we tested like 20 different things, and there's a picture of a cow with a beam of light over, but the cow's upside down, so it was like an abduction game. We had this whole mechanic figured out. Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing at the time. So, so anyways, that's why Cat Pirates. So don't let the ads mislead you. You need to also know what will work on the platform.
What did you were saying that you created some ads for games that didn't exist. What did you link people through to when they clicked on?
We sent them to other people's games. Related though, like if there was a baking game, we'd sent them to some other baking game off on the internet. We didn't care. We just wanted to know if they were going to click on it.
How nice of
Can you talk a bit about monetization? Has it evolved, or is it sustainable?
Monetization is always sustainable. If you know what you're doing, it is. I mean, Facebook credits, that's a whole other topic of conversation, but if you design your game well, you will figure out ways to make people pay. I think the two core ways on Facebook are basically you pay for impatience. So you can always play for free, but if you sort of want to speed something up, you can pay to skip that time. And then the other big one is, oh, now it's slipping my mind. Oh yeah, basically you either have your friends help you or you pay us. Or you get your friends involved or you pay us. That's another big monetization.
Let's take another question and then we'll continue.
So you talk a lot about Eric Ries and MVP, and I subscribe to a lot of the same ideals. But one of the things I find is that it works great in the B2B space. But in game design, what I found is when we change game mechanics on players, on a substantial audience already in place, they throw a huge shit fit, right? Because the old way is always better than the new way for someone who grew up with the old way. So have you had experiences, sort of consoling the community? How do you deal with them when you change a major component?
So on Cat's Cove, we had this. It used to be that you had these cannons shooting across at each other, and it worked with a certain mechanic. We did a split test down the middle. Of course, we didn't have a lot of users, but we did the split test down the middle where you had Pokemon battle pets. 20% retention increase. But how did we console the audience? At that point, we barely had an audience. Even 4,000 actually, 8,000 daily actives. We got a lot of complaints. But in the end, if you don't have a product that's winning, it's not going to be a problem. Now, what do you do when you have a product that has a substantial base? So, what is a substantial base?
Well, say Baking Life. Have you changed anything major in Baking Life since launch?
So we've changed a few larger things, but in terms of the core mechanic, we haven't. But one thing you can do is you can do a small split test on a small percentage of your audience, and you can also play test it in advance. But it is dangerous to manage a community response to something like that. Yeah.
I can tell from experience.
I completely ignore user complaints, and what I pay attention to is how the numbers change.
Yes.
So like, people are going to complain when things change no matter what, but what you care about is not, hey, I got 800 complaints. What you care about is like, user retention went up 20%, people are playing the game more, people are paying more money, people, like, actions always speak louder than words, and there are going to be these curmudgeonly players that are going to whine no matter what. They don't want a better game. They just want the old game, and you cannot please them no matter what you do, because these games have to evolve. So look at your numbers. Facebook does it too. Like every time they change the news feed, I mean, there's boohoo, we're all going to leave Facebook. You know, there's 1 million people complaining.
Yeah, and I would add to that also that if they also test it on a small chunk of their audience first, and they watch the numbers, right? And then if the numbers go up, then it'll probably, you know, generalize to the larger audience.
0.2% of your user base is complaining really loudly. Like, you're not going to worry about keeping them happy. You're going to worry about, like, holy crap, you know, 99.8% of my audience is thrilled. That's what you care about.
Yeah, we were really happy when the retention went up on Cat's Cove. The game still sucked and didn't monetize worth crap, but we got the numbers to go up. But you know, that was more about Cat's Cove than that specific test.
Thank you, Curt.